And the idea of 40 days of impact is that we're going to meet people where they are. He's first going to have an impact on us as we press in. And then we're willing to meet people right where they are. In other words, that, I'm not just looking for someone who's just like me, or encountering people who just think the way I think or act the way I act. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. When Christ sends out his disciples, he's sending them into the world. And sometimes the world doesn't act the way we want it to act, does it? But we're called into that place. And to have an impact is a willingness to meet people where they are. That I'm willing to, I think one of the problems in the church in the West that we've come to is most churches want people to come already saved before they get there. In other words, we forgot that we're praying for the lost and the broken and the hurting and the suffering, or we forgot where we've come from. That we came in that way. Lost, hurting, broken, thinking differently, acting differently, behaving differently. So even in our vision statement is we declare we're going to meet people where they are and then let Christ bring his love and transformation that he so desires. Well, that's part of the impact. Now, Jesus gives us a mission. We talked about that last week. And the mission answers a question in our life, why we exist. That's what a mission does. It answers a question, why do I exist? Why do we exist? And if you're in the faith, if you're a member here at this church, we have a mission statement that's biblical, that I believe is on the call of every individual who worships here, and I believe it's the call of the church in general. And our mission statement, say it with me, is to love God, love people, and what? Build disciples. That's why we exist. And we're working on that love of God, that personal impact. And then loving people, that outward impact. And then that continues as we build that discipleship. That's why we exist. And the difference between existing and living is actually how we'll have an impact in others' lives. See, if I'm just existing, it's all about me. If I'm living, I'm being effective in people's lives around me. And impact, what that means is when two objects come together, it will leave an impression. That's the definition of the word impact. Two things come together, there will be an impression left. Some good, some not so good. Depends on the impact, but it will leave an impression. Well, this past week, I went for my 6-month dental cleaning to a dentist. Everyone's favorite thing to do, right? So 6 months ago when I went, and I've been going there for years, and my family goes there, and one of the people works there. 6 months ago, this woman, Joanne, asked me to pray. And we made conversation, and I came back this time, 6 months later, and she's asking about my dogs and the family and how's everyone doing, and we're talking. And I go for my x-rays cleaning, and I come back out, and I look at Joanne, and I said, Joanne, this is 6 months later, I just want to let you know that I've been praying every day for Edwin and Janelle that you asked me to pray for 6 months ago. And tears begin to fill her eyes instantly. But she asked me to pray. And I don't usually take that lightly. And then I write it down and I keep it on my prayer list, an ongoing list of things I pray for and I follow up on. And I add those. I've been praying for 6 months and I haven't known the outcome. And her response was emotional. Her response was like, you actually listened to what I said and actually did it? And the praise report is they're doing real well, thanks be to God. Then she said, I promise I'm going to come to church. Joanne, if you're listening right now and maybe not here, you promised you were going to come to church. And if you don't, I'm no longer praying. So that's how that works. I'm just kidding. What kind of impression do you think that left? Two objects come together. They leave what? An impression. Is fear holding us back from truly living? And we're just existing? Is is that maybe what's holding us back from leaving an impression and having an impact. Fear has got me in a place where I just exist in life. I'm not living life. Fear has that stronghold in my life. Now, all of us experience fear. Every person experiences fear. And there's two kinds of fear. There's rational and what, church? Irrational. Now, rational fear is when our nervous system identifies danger. Danger, Will Robinson. Danger, danger. Our nervous system says something's wrong. It activates. And what takes place is that there's a fight or flight response, that there's danger that lies ahead. A rational danger is the house is, or fear is the house is on fire, and we don't go, oh, it's fine. We respond, and we get out of the house, and we call 911. We do it. There's a rational response to something. The nervous system tells us what to do. Then there's irrational fear. Irrational fear is when something presents little or actually no danger. That's irrational. Presents little or practically no danger. And we call those phobias. Phobia means fear. That's what it is. So I went down the old Google rabbit hole on phobias. Can I just tell you, there's a lot of phobias. Hundreds of phobias. I mean, just pick something. People are afraid of windows, tissues, words. There's a word phobia. I was like, really? It's fascinating. I spent way too much time researching phobias. I'm just glad I didn't come away with new ones. You know what I mean? It's irrational. And then I read some articles, and there's kind of a top 3 phobias that most people struggle with, which is irrational, but we struggle with them. The first one is glossophobia. Glosso is your tongue. And phobia is the fear. And glossophobia is the number one fear is public speaking for everybody. So I don't have a problem with that one. But most people do. It's a glossophobia. The second, they say, that is great among people is acrophobia, where we get the word acrobat from, which is a fear of what? Heights. Fear of heights. Third one, I don't know how it was all the way in the top 5 of the list, but it was dentophobia. The dentist. There's a fear of the dentist. And it's in the top 10 of the list of this phobia that we would have. And they're not rational. The phobias that we mostly face are irrational. So what fear are we facing right now? Is your fear rational or is your fear irrational? People debate what's the opposite of fear. Some say courage. We know it's faith. But they don't know courage is the opposite of fear. But no, we would say faith is. Because the first thing you would have to do with that argument is answer, where does courage come from? Where does that begin? Where do we find that very courage? Joshua 1:9, the Lord speaks to Joshua and he says this to him, have I not commanded you? Be strong and what? Courageous. Do not be what? Afraid. Do not be what? Discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. To have courage, we must have faith and believe that God is with us. So the opposite of fear is faith. Because it takes faith where we begin to have the courage that comes from God. Now, if you want to look it up, 365 times it says in the scriptures, do not be afraid. It's mostly directed as a command, not a suggestion. God's saying, don't be that. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. Now, in today's gospel, chapter 8 of Mark, Jesus asks his disciples. Now, you got to understand what's taking place. They fed the 5,000. He healed the blind men just previous to this question where he grabs his disciples together. But he's about to get them prepared for what's next. And the reality is they're probably going to have some fear with what they're about to hear. And he tells them, I'm going to have to die and suffer on a cross. He's preparing them for what's to take place next. So he starts with a question, and he asks, he says, who do men say that I am? He says, who are they saying I am? What are you hearing? What's the word on the street with all that's been taking place? And their response is John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets of old. These are the things that we're hearing, who people believe that you are. And then Jesus just says, well, who do you say that I am? Who am I to you personally? Who am I to you? And we know Peter makes a declaration of faith, and he says, you are the what, church? The Christ. He makes that declaration. And he goes on in Mark 8:31, and then he began to teach them these things. He was preparing them. If you believe that he's the Christ, here's what the Christ is going to have to do. That you would prepare this. Matter of fact, he's going to say it in chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10, that he's going to face his death and have to conquer the cross. And he's telling them this is what you need to now prepare for that lies ahead, so you won't have to be afraid. So he begins to teach them, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed. And after 3 days, he'll rise again. Now, I don't know why he didn't say right after that, so don't be afraid, but he didn't. But right after that, Peter disagrees with what he just said. Peter pulls Jesus aside for a little rebuke. Then Jesus pulls Peter aside for a little rebuke. That's where the famous quote that everyone likes to say is, "Get behind me, Satan." That he rebukes the thoughts of Peter. He's not rebuking Peter, and Peter is not Satan. It's the influence. It's the thought. It's getting off God's plan, God's greater mission that was in store for Jesus' life. And he says to him, you're not mindful of the things of God. You're mindful of the things of man. And when you're mindful of the things of man, you're not going to fulfill the things of God. And Peter believed that Jesus was going to lead the Jewish people from the tyranny of Rome. He believed, like, this is our hour. The time has come. All these great things are happening. Why would you go die and tell us all of this? That's not the plan. Peter had his own plan for Jesus and what he expected Jesus to do. And if Jesus would have listened to Peter's plan, we wouldn't be here right now. Because he had the things of man in mind, not the things of God. Peter's thoughts came from a place of fear. He was afraid. He was afraid what would happen if that took place. And he was afraid because he had the things of man in mind, not the things of God. He had his self-agenda in mind, not God's agenda for his life. 3 things that Peter feared that we also fear. Peter had a fear of failure, fear of rejection, and a fear of change. These are 3 things that Peter faced that we face as well. See, the things of man make us fearful. The things of God make us faithful. And those are the same 3 struggles that we'll face that we need to overcome. So we look at these 3. We have these 3 fears that each of us will face: a fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of change that we have to overcome. Well, what is the fear of failure? The fear of failure is avoiding anything that has the potential for an unsuccessful outcome. That's the fear of failure. That you're just going to avoid anything that might not be in your favor and have a positive outcome. So you do nothing. You're afraid of failing. Do you know Thomas Edison failed 2,774 times before inventing the light bulb? Do you think at failure 2000 he was like, I'm really done with this thing? I mean, I'd be at failure 25 and probably be like, well, I gave it a good run. 25 is a lot. What about 2,773? Like, that's enough. What was the one more? I'll just go one more at this. And he invents the light bulb. And then in his 84 years that he lived, he acquired an astounding 1,093 patents. That means he invented all these other things post-light bulb, including the phonograph, motion picture camera, as well as improving the telegraph and the telephone. And besides all his inventions, he learned to manage and build a successful manufacturing business. He learned marketing and continued to bring his inventions to the public and to the world. All because he was willing to go that one more time to get over that fear of failure. While failure is rarely celebrated, it can be a crucial stepping stone to the pathway of victory. See, when we fail, we want to fail forward, not back. We want to fail moving forward. And our God is faithful, and He'll always help us overcome our failures. The lie is, He won't. But He will always intervene and overcome our failures. You know, there's a saying in business for startups or organizations. It says, if you're going to fail, fail quickly. And the reason being, it gets very expensive to fail slowly over time. But if it's going to fail, fail quickly and then figure out what to do next. Proverbs 24:16, for the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. That we're going to face forward and overcome that fear of failure. Because right on the other side of that, God has in store a great victory. Second fear, fear of rejection. And a fear of rejection is a distress of not being liked, abandoned, or fitting in. So we fear that someone's going to reject us. So what do? We isolate. We don't make new friends. We don't have many friends. We keep ourselves out of that vulnerability or that place where we'd actually be open because we might get hurt. So we have this fear of rejection. And we guard ourselves and we put barriers up. And so nothing can get in within our lives. And that fear of rejection holds back what God wants to do and move in our life. You know, Michael Jordan, the most famous basketball player of all time, was cut from his high school basketball team. He was cut during high school. And this is why he was cut. The coach told him he wasn't tall enough and didn't possess the skills and drive to succeed. I'm just glad I'm not that coach. That's all I had to tell you. I'm just glad that wasn't me. So what did he do? He overcame a fear of rejection. He used that as a way to be motivated, and he became an iconic athlete that changed the very face of the sport, going on 6 NBA championships, 5 MVPs, and 14-time All-Star. He was cut from his high school team. If he let fear of rejection, he would have never overcome and been victorious in his life. But he was able to overcome. Psalm 118:22. The stone which the builders rejected has what? Become the chief cornerstone. The ones who rejected Jesus has become the chief cornerstone. Finally, fear of change. Fear of change is an intense anxiety when facing a new situation or experience. That's what's happening. So we're facing change and we get anxious because there's a new situation or experience that's going to take place. And what I've discovered in all my years of ministry is 2 things. One is every single human hates change. We always go back to complacency. Our nature is to go back to what's comfortable. We don't embrace change. The second thing I've learned in all my years of ministry is that I can't change anybody. Only God can. I spent the first half of my ministry trying to change everybody as God's little helper. I really started getting angry at people. You know why? They wouldn't just change. And Jesus softly one day told me, you're not in charge of the change, I am. But if you have a fear of change, you'll never change. You'll be stuck in that place that you won't have a new experience or allow the opportunity of a new situation or whatever might move forward. But the kingdom's all about change. Being in the kingdom's all about learning how to be adaptable of what God's going to do next today. Here we go, Lord. What is it? And we have to overcome a fear of change. Well, there were two brothers who owned a successful and efficient burger restaurant, and it caught the eye of a milkshake salesman in the 50s. And the milkshake salesman convinced the two brothers that they should franchise the burger restaurant. He thought this is a good idea. It's so efficient. It's working so well that you should franchise this restaurant, that we could get this out to other people. And the two brothers consistently told the milkshake salesman that he could not make any changes to the original blueprint that was put in place. That you can't change the way we came up with an efficient way. You can't make any changes to what we put in place. Well, the McDonald brothers eventually sold the control of the company to Ray Kroc in 1961 for $2.7 million. Not bad. But today, the Golden Arches employs 1.9 million people and does $25.5 billion a year in sales. That makes it the 90th largest economy in the world. Kroc didn't have a fear of change. He could see past what already existed and said there's some place further to go. There's something next. Our unwillingness to change will always keep us from the greatest possibility that lies ahead in our life. See, Jesus would clearly explain the need for change and why they shouldn't fear it. That they would understand this and that you would understand this, church, today. Mark chapter 8, 34 through 35. This is what he tells them. He says, when he had called the people to himself and his disciples also, they gathered around. He said to them, whoever desires to come after me, do you know this one? Let them what, church? Deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Then he says, whoever desires to save his life will what? Lose it. And whoever loses his life will what? Save it. For my sake in the gospel, it will be saved. Don't fear. The way we truly save our lives starts with a desire to go after Jesus. Whoever desires to come after me, it starts with a desire to come after him. And it's that desire to come after him that begins to move us in a direction that he calls. If we don't desire him, we will never deny him. I said that wrong. If we don't desire him, we won't deny ourselves. If we don't desire him, we won't deny him. If we don't desire him, we won't deny ourselves. We can't move to the next step. If you desire to come after me, deny yourself. If I'm unwilling to deny myself, that means that I'm stuck in that place, that I don't know, I don't have that desire in place, then I'll never be able to deny myself, to take that next step. So if we don't deny ourselves, then we stay stuck. And we're stuck in a place of fear. And that fear is failure, rejection, and change. Our desire for Jesus leads us to faith, and it's our faith that overcomes our fears. Not our courage, it's our faith that overcomes them. And the greatest impact we'll have in people's lives comes from that desire to follow Jesus. We get to share with people in our lives how they too can save their life. But it starts with a desire. So I'm giving you homework this week. I want you to take one step this week. One step. And the one step I'm going to ask you to do is to have an experience of meeting someone new. Doesn't have to be a long time. But I want you to take an experience of encountering someone new. Meet someone new. See, this will give you an opportunity to overcome the fear of failure, rejection, and change. This is that opportunity to break through in any of those areas that we might be stuck in. And when we begin to operate from a place of faith, we will have courage to now overcome our fears. Amen? Let's pray.